Hi, welcome to Maker's Bar. I'm your host, Akshata Shetty. Today we have Shaw Talebi, who is the founder of Data Entrepreneur and an AI educator. I am really excited to have him and to learn a little bit about AI from him. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, Akshata, thanks for having me on. I love that intro song. Very
Yeah.
funky. You write that yourself?
No, it's actually by a musician who believes in open source music. So
Oh, nice.
I actually, and it's license free. I loved the music so much, and then I said, "This is it. This is it." And it's open source for it's free. I don't have to pay for the license, and I think so he's created a bunch of music which is all
Free.
given it for free. So
Yeah,
I
nice.
am grateful to him. So,
Yeah.
so he's
But
becoming ubiquitous through his music, I
yeah,
would say.
well, I guess it's good. It would be awkward if you like give your music away for free and no one wants to use it. I feel like that's what happens with my music.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully somebody will use your music as well. And
One day.
yeah. So, anyways, so Shaw, tell me a little bit about your early career and how did you get started doing what you're doing in AI? And I'm sure
Yeah.
everybody's now curious because everybody wants to get into AI.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my formal training is actually in physics,
Mhm.
and maybe initially that might sound surprising, but I guess the Nobel in physics actually went to AI researchers this past
Yes.
year, so maybe it's not so crazy. And actually, if you spend a little bit of time in AI and machine learning, you'll start
Yeah.
to run into a handful of physicists and like
Yeah.
mathematicians that but that's one of the things I love about the space. It's like so diverse. Like you have people from all sorts of like technical backgrounds and even like non-technical backgrounds, like you
Yeah.
know, from like social sciences, hard sciences. I've met some teachers in the space,
Mhm.
so that's one of the things I really like about it. But anyway, so formal training in physics. Um, Not sure how far back I should go, but let me just give the short version. So I got my PhD in physics, and then I worked as a data scientist at Toyota.
Uh-huh.
And then after doing that for about a year, I felt the call and pull of entrepreneurship, and I was seeing all the excitement with ChatGPT, and I felt like I was, falling behind in a sense because the space was moving so fast, and there were
Yeah.
these new things called large language models, which I didn't like understand because that is very much different than the now what we call traditional machine learning
Yeah.
that I was used to, and
Yeah.
so I was just super curious about it, and I ended up just eventually leaving my job and venturing out on my own, and
Mhm.
so that's been a wild ride. Been doing that for about 18 months now, and it's
Mhm.
been all sorts of things. So like freelance, doing consulting, or maybe just like doing a lot of different things. So like a little bit of freelance, a little bit of consulting,
Yeah.
making a lot of content, writing blogs, making videos,
Mhm.
doing events, free events with the data entrepreneurs, doing a podcast with the data entrepreneurs. Um, you know, trying to do like doing these different educational offers, like trying to
Yeah.
do workshops for corporations, and trying to be a
Mhm.
full-time content creator. So I've tried so many different things.
Yeah.
But now what seems to be working for me is I have a course called the AI Builders Bootcamp, which people seem to be getting value from. The
Yeah.
YouTube channel is growing and my content channels are growing. So just putting out free content. And then some people who, want that more hands-on interactive learning,
Mhm.
will take the course.
Mhm.
But then beyond that, I also have the data entrepreneurs, which is what the hat is, and that's just like for people like me. So there are a lot of
Yeah.
technical people out there who, they could make a lot of money
Mhm.
working at a company because
Mhm.
it's a really high demand skill set: AI,
Yeah.
machine learning, data science, whatever it
Yeah.
is. But I feel like a lot of people they're just not like satisfied with that for whatever
Yeah.
reason. Like for me, I don't really care much about money. I care more about like growth and freedom.
Yeah.
So That's one of the reasons, because I'm making like like last year, my first full year as an entrepreneur, I made 25 grand, which is in stark contrast
Mm.
to how much I made as a data scientist, which was $150,000.
Yeah.
So it like definitely not for the money, but I feel
Yeah.
so much more like energized and fulfilled by the work
Mhm.
that I'm doing. And I feel like I'm constantly learning.
Mhm.
Um, and I have the freedom to pursue my curiosity. Like recently, I just did a whole project on fine tuning multimodal embedding models. And there would
Mhm.
be an opportunity to do something like that, at
Yes.
Toyota, because it's so like far off from something that would bring value to the business, but it's like
Yeah.
personally interesting to me. um, and I was able to make content out of it. So I guess that's like a long-winded way of saying I
Yeah.
was a physicist, I was a data scientist, and now I um, teach people AI and make free content.
Okay. So, so I see that you have a lot of followership across all your social media platforms, right? And because you're creating all this content and everything. So, how did you, when you left your job, how did you get to doing that? And now I think you've built a substantial followership compared to the first year where you made 25 grand, right?
Hmm.
In AI.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a good question. I actually started making content way before I left my job, way before I even
Hmm.
had my job. So I was a grad student getting
Hmm.
my PhD, and my approach was very simple. I was writing this dissertation, and
Yeah.
basically I would take sections of my dissertation and post them as blogs.
Yeah.
And then I would take those blogs and make YouTube videos out of it. That was my whole process. And it hasn't really changed since then. I'm not writing a dissertation. I just write blogs and make videos out of them now.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. So I've been doing it for about 4 years, actually.
Uh-huh.
So I've been doing it for like 2.5 years or
Uh-huh.
so before I actually left my job. But
Hmm.
what's crazy is like when I left my job, I had about 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is not
Okay.
nothing. Like I had
Yeah.
just hit monetization. I made
Yeah.
like 50 cents or something like that in my first month.
Yeah.
Um, but then once I left, I like was able to finally just go all in
Hmm.
on doing whatever I wanted to do, because I feel like I'm a naturally curious person. I feel like a lot of people in this space are too. That's
Yeah.
why they go after, no one really studies physics or some of these like really hard sciences to
Yeah.
make money. They do
Yeah.
it because it's like interesting to them and they're
Yeah.
pursuing their curiosity. And
Yeah.
so I finally like felt like a weight had been lifted, like I was unshackled and released, and I could
Yeah.
finally like start consuming content, like reading papers and building
Yeah.
stuff that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I kind of dove headfirst into this 6-part series on large language models, which I don't even
Mm.
know if that was the goal. I think I just like dove into large language models and then just started making videos about it.
Okay.
But that series, that really was the start of like my channel's really growing. So it went
Hmm.
from like 2,000 to 5,000, I think,
Hmm.
from July to December.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, over the next, like now it's at 45,000. So it kind of grew like another, 5x or so, or
Yeah.
10x or so
Yeah.
since then. And it's just, so I had been making content for a while, but I've
Yeah.
basically gotten all my followers in the
Yeah.
past year or so.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like the nature of content creation. It's like this 80-20 phenomenon,
Yeah.
like 20% of the customers get you 80% of the revenue, 20% of your
Mm.
content gives you 80% of your viewership.
Yeah.
20%. And so like, the most recent content is going to give me the biggest viewership.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's how I got started. And then that's basically the story of like how I got here from when I left my job.
So, so I totally hear you. I work in AI as well right now. So, so I see, like, I don't have time to catch up.
Yeah, that's what I felt the same exact way.
I don't have the time to catch up. It was very interesting. Like we'll talk about the DeepSeek model and everything, but we just had that model, and I didn't have the time to read the paper
Yep.
until like it's been a week. I have not had the time to read the paper, and we'll talk about it if you have read the paper. But
I haven't read the
and
paper.
then I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh my god, the industry is moving so fast, and I
Yep.
am not able to catch up. I feel
Yep.
like I'm a lagger right here, kind of a thing. So if like if I have to like move to my next role or something like that, I definitely have to spend a good 3 months just looking at what's new.
Yeah.
What's new kind of a thing, right? So yeah, I definitely hear you when you said that you felt shackled when you were doing this and the industry was like moving really really fast, especially foundation model. I think I saw it in 2020,
Hmm.
and I was pretty blown away by what OpenAI. I actually saw OpenAI APIs, so I was pretty blown away.
The GPT-2, or
Yeah,
what was
yeah,
it?
back then. And I saw those API. I didn't even realize it was GPT-2, GPT-3, or
Oh,
whatever.
okay, yeah.
Because I was a computer science person, not an AI
Oh, got it,
person.
got it.
So and then I saw it and I was like, this is something else. This is really cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, like now we have like a proper AI field which was not existent 2 or 3, I mean actually 3 years ago at this
Hmm.
point, and kind of a thing. I mean, I don't say that AI didn't exist. I took my neural networks course in my 8th semester, and I
Yeah.
have to say, I looked at that course and I said to myself that nobody's going to ever touch this. This is
Oh wow. Yeah, that's
competition.
funny. I mean, that's what everyone was telling Jeff Hinton when he was like starting studying neural networks, and like this is a waste of time, like
Yeah,
telling
yeah,
students not to
yeah,
telling grad students not to study with him because that stuff's not going anywhere. But
yeah.
AI's been around for a very long time. So it's been
Yes,
like
yeah,
70 years now.
yeah,
But it's gone through like three key paradigm shifts, at least the
yeah,
way I'm thinking about it right
yeah,
now. And
yeah,
really, this is very much influenced by the thinking of a very prominent AI researcher, Andre Karpathy,
yeah,
who kind of described things as software 1.0 and software 2.0. So software
yeah.
1.0 are your rules-based systems. So
Mhm.
this is the stuff you learned in your computer science courses, I'm sure, and the
Yeah,
way people were thinking about building automations and AI
yes,
is essentially just writing software. Like
yeah.
you have some process you're trying to automate.
Mhm.
Right now, the approach is like, okay, how does the human do this process? And
Right.
let me just hard code some logic into the computer and tell
Mhm.
it step by step exactly how to do this task.
Yeah,
But over the past like 30 years, we've seen the rise of machine learning, which, instead of having to write these rules explicitly and
yeah,
give these instructions explicitly to the
yeah,
computer, instead you can just gather a bunch of data
yeah,
of the task that you want the computer to do, and then the
yeah,
computer can just teach itself. It learns by example,
yeah,
just like we might learn at school or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
But now with GPT and large language models, now like people
yeah,
are thinking like AI is like this new thing.
yeah,
It's really just like this third wave of AI, which
yeah,
people are calling software 3.0.
yeah,
And now, instead of having to write rules explicitly or having to gather data, which are both like very challenging tasks,
yeah,
now you can adapt these foundation models to very custom use cases
yeah,
just by prompting, just by writing a text description like you were to tell someone.
yeah, yeah.
And you can even take that one step further and
Mm.
doing this like fine tuning. So let's say the prompting isn't kind of getting you what you need, but you do
Mhm.
have like a small data set, like maybe 50 to like 5,000
Yes.
records or something like that. You can
Mhm.
use that data to fine tune the foundation model
Mhm.
to perform even better than the foundation model or any machine
Yeah,
learning model that you could
yeah,
have trained from scratch using the
yeah,
software 2.0
yeah.
approach. So I don't know, it's just like a very exciting time to be in this field. And one of the reasons I love that I have like the freedom and flexibility to kind of research and study whatever I want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Maker's Bar is also like my pet project, or
Yeah.
now it has become so full blown, right?
Yeah.
It also started as like something that I was doing because initially it was because I wanted PR, I wanted to fundraise at some point in time.
Okay.
But then I'm an introvert by nature.
Hmm.
I would rather any day pick my books and read my books than talk to a bunch more people. So I realized that, I mean, I took a trip to India, and then I realized, I mean, over there, I don't know, it just enforced that I should give voice to a lot of folks and
Hmm.
create and raise a million leaders. So we opened it up, and now, very similar. We've done both organic and inorganic push, but now, I mean,
Interesting.
it's just organic as well. We are just getting a lot of followership,
Yeah. Nice.
and it's been quite. quite a journey. It's very similar. 1.5 years, we started making content, all of us put together, who genuinely wanted to talk to like really smart people, and it. I mean, it's funny. Like uh, people who are at like who are the CEOs of the company, they get all the media they want, right? But people who are like moderately successful are also CEOs of some companies, but they are not. Probably a Fortune 500 company
Mm.
CEO, right? They also need some kind of place where they tell their story, right? So these were some of the things that we kind of initially thought about, and here we are, and we are slowly getting. I mean, we're slowly having more followership, and it's growing as a brand.
Yeah.
And I hear you. We don't work with brands exclusively as of now. It's just because I just want to make sure that we reach a point where it's like we get more quality leaders than anything else, right?
Yeah.
And then I totally hear your sentiments. 50 cents, yeah, I have made no money out of YouTube either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a myth. Whoever says that you can make money out of YouTube, they're lying to you. You cannot
Yeah.
make money out of YouTube, right?
So there's a
So
caveat. Let me just
yeah,
quick note on that. So
yeah,
okay, so you can make a little bit of money through YouTube. So I've consistently made like $500 to $1,000 a month, like over the
okay,
past year on YouTube.
yeah,
But you can't pay your bills, at least like not in the US. You can't pay your
yeah,
bills on that.
yeah,
But there are two ways that people do like can like make good money through content
yeah,
creation. The first one is through sponsorships. So
yeah,
if you like have a good niche, you have a good audience, and
yeah,
you figure out how to kind of partner with brands that
mm,
are valuable to your audience, that
yeah,
can be very lucrative because you basically like show your audience products that they need and then they buy it, and
yeah,
then the brands
yeah,
will pay you
yeah,
because you're giving them a lot of business or you're making money through affiliate links.
yeah,
um and like what you're saying, it that's you know some people they like doing that. Like I
yeah,
personally don't like doing that. It just gives me a headache every time I
yeah,
like have to like try to figure out how to
yeah,
fit some company's product into my
yeah,
content, because it's
yeah,
already hard enough for me to try to like put all the puzzle pieces together and
yeah,
make
yeah,
it all make sense.
yeah.
But I don't know, maybe things will change over time.
For
But the
me, it
second
was
way,
more, yeah,
oh
yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
again.
Yeah, for me, it was
Okay,
more diluting of my brand. I didn't
right.
want to get diluted by some sponsorship kind of a
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can fit in if we wanted to. I recently saw, oh my God, I'm just blanking on his name right now. I cannot believe it. I'm blanking on his name. He was a journalist at Fox, and then he basically has its own podcast now. I might not agree with him a lot, but oh my God, Tucker Carlson. I saw Tucker
Oh,
Carlson's
sure. Yeah.
podcast. Yeah. So Tucker Carlson's podcast, and then he had like put some random ads across, right?
Mm.
And then I was like, this is like such an insult to Tucker Carlson in my
Oh,
head.
okay.
In my head, I might not agree with him, but at least he's done some amount
Right,
of good
right.
journalism.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So like you have to be kind of careful about your
Yeah,
reputation and personal brand, because Tucker
yeah,
Carlson's had this fall from grace.
yeah,
And like no
yeah,
brands, like they don't want to touch him. So they
yeah,
don't, and then
yeah,
there was this problem too
yeah,
with like X. Like X
yeah,
almost went out of business
yeah,
because no one wanted to touch Elon.
yeah,
Um and so, that's like another thing. You got
yeah,
to be mindful about that.
yeah,
So the second thing though is you can create your own product or service,
yeah,
and then that's how you monetize. So I've kind of like found that with my course actually. So
yeah,
like a subs, because I feel like the natural next level of free educational AI content on YouTube is like
yeah,
a paid AI bootcamp. Like
yeah,
that's like the obvious next step for a lot of
yeah,
people.
yeah,
And so like I don't do call outs or anything. Like maybe I could do a better job and I'm still figuring out the most effective way to do this. But like
yeah,
I simply just started by putting a link in the
yeah,
description, like learn AI in 6 weeks by building it. And then I just
yeah,
put a link to the course and that's
yeah,
it. And
yeah,
actually like 70% of the people who signed up for my first cohort like found me
yes.
through YouTube. You know what I mean? They found
Wow.
me through my
Yeah,
content.
yeah, yeah,
So and then that first cohort I made like $10,000. So it's like you can make money through these other
yeah,
ways, but like through AdSense directly, like
yeah,
you have to be like a huge creator to make like a
yeah.
livable income off
I
that.
think when you become an indisputable creator like a Mr. Beast or something like
Oh
that,
yeah,
even YouTube has probably certain SLAs that they have to meet. They cannot muck around with you, kind of a thing,
yeah. Mhm.
right? So So yeah, I think it's a long way for us to get there. Probably, I don't know if we create content that's as intriguing as Mr. Beast is, but I think we definitely create content which a wide variety of audience will consume at one point in their life or the other, kind of
Mhm.
a thing. So yeah, I think it's slightly, ours is more like a micro TEDx kind of a thing, and Mr. Beast is like everybody's consuming, like all kids are
Right.
consuming
Yeah.
some content.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like knowing your audience because
yeah,
like, Mr. Beast like appeals to, well, I guess
yeah,
everyone can watch Mr. Beast, but it's usually younger kids and
yeah,
stuff. So that
yeah,
tends to be like the products that he'll advertise
yeah,
and sell himself, like Beast bars. Like he's
yeah,
selling candy. Who eats candy? Like
yeah,
kids eat candy.
yeah,
Um, and then I guess he does like a lot of sponsorships. I've seen like Shopify and like I've been watching Beast games on
yeah,
Amazon Prime, and there's always like a Money Lion call out. Like I've
yeah,
never heard of Money Lion, but
yeah,
now I know about it.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just interesting to like observe this stuff and
yeah,
like yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot we could say about like you know aligning the like finding the right audience and then
yeah,
finding the right sponsors and just getting
yeah,
that alignment and
yeah,
also like aligning it with the content that you make. So it's a lot of different puzzle pieces and it can look a
yeah,
lot of different ways,
yeah.
but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, and even I saw that even in Joe Rogan again. I saw like some of his sponsors were like, okay, I was like, why is Joe Rogan doing it? But it probably pays the bills. And
Yeah,
recently I learned that some of the folks who are probably in a very, like, not in exactly the same space as we are, like they are doing exclusive content for brands like Microsoft and
sure.
all of that, and they're getting paid a lot for
Like
that.
by Microsoft.
Yeah, yeah, like Microsoft, Amaze, Visa, and I think for me, like my thing is like more to give voice to like folks who are
Yeah.
moderately successful, because most people cannot be the CEO of Microsoft. I mean, you can hear the CEO of Microsoft everywhere. You don't
Yeah.
need to come to here to hear the CEO of Microsoft. For me, it's stories of moderately successful people who have basically made it, right? Very similar to what TED is. I mean, TED obviously has more successful people as well,
Mm.
and who we've had journalists, New York Times, I mean New York Post journalists. We've had somebody who was an Ashoka fellow. We've had directors. We have movie directors and producers. We have all kinds of folks now, like who've made independent movies and all that. And I definitely think that we are going in a direction like where we're creating intellectual content, and we're giving voice to folks. But we'll see. I mean, at this point, like I'm like you, I'm not very motivated by money. I
Right.
don't get moved by money that easily. I mean, for me, like all my life, I've always taken up roles where it was more because the work was interesting. So I never worked for the Googles of the world in my life
Mm. Mm.
because I didn't want to be boxed in some project which I didn't want to like work on. But for me, I was always like, I want to work on things which are very interesting. Like right now, we are working on figuring out how to discover new polymers using AI models, very similar
Mm.
to how the physics PhDs got their Nobel. We're trying to do that, and not me, a bunch of scientists. So I'm just putting together the infrastructure for it. So this kind of work, like obviously interests,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of a
So
thing.
that's yeah. I feel like the value of your channel is because this like a CEO of Microsoft, they're so far ahead of
Yeah,
most people. Like
yeah,
like I'm sure like there's a lot I could learn from Satya, but like
yeah,
he's like miles ahead of me. I
yeah,
would probably learn more from
yeah,
someone who has just started to make like I don't know like $30,000 a month as like an independent like
yeah,
AI educator or something like
yeah,
that. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Because
yeah,
they're like one or
yeah,
two steps ahead of me.
yeah,
And that's really the value I see is like these kinds of
yeah,
conversations because like the advice I get from like a Satya or like a Bezos or
yeah,
Musk or something like that, it's probably going to be generally broad advice,
yeah,
like kind of oriented toward a public audience.
yeah,
But then when you have like these smaller people, you
yeah,
can kind of get that like more specific advice that
yeah,
is kind of much more valuable for a specific audience,
Yeah, yeah.
even if it's not like more broad, like it's not going to be valuable to a broad audience.
Yeah, yeah. And I totally, that was like my fundamental thesis. I was like, I don't need to read another book from Satya. I mean, Satya is actually one of my favorite CEOs
Oh,
as
nice.
well. So I don't need to read another book from Satya anymore. Like, as you rightly pointed out, that's why you are in this interview, right? We are trying to figure out, like, how did you do this? And everybody is talking about AI education right now, right?
Mm,
And, and people don't even understand, like, so just so that, I mean, I was going to bring it up as we were talking about about your AI classes. I was in India in 2023, and I saw this ad on, and that time I think Chat GPT had kind of happened. It just happened a few months ago, and I opened like Times of India, and I see this ad. I'd gone there to visit my in-laws, and I see this ad, and it says, "Oh, AI course for $1." But I don't know how good the AI cost for for
right,
$1
right,
would
right.
be, right? So, and they are trying to play this volumes game kind of
Yeah,
with it, because it is like got a mass population and
yeah,
all
yeah,
of that, right? So it was very interesting, and I felt like there is I mean, I am constantly educating myself as the field is growing so fast, right? It is very hard for people to start somewhere,
yeah,
right? If you So I have a pure computer science background. I did my undergrad in computer science, master's in software engineering. And when I looked at it, it was accidental because I was looking at it for work, and I looked at
mm,
OpenAI APIs, right? But if somebody was starting off now, and a lot of friends of mine ask me, like, how do I start off with AI? And then I
yeah,
tell them, go read retrieval augmented generation, and nobody wants to learn. That's the fastest way to understand what we're doing in AI,
yeah.
retrieval augmented generation. So, anyways, but you tell me, what would you suggest to someone who's just starting off?
So I will say, like, these days there's so many free resources on
Yeah,
learning AI. Like, it doesn't make sense to try to make a bargain course that's paid. Like, it
yeah,
doesn't make sense to have a $1 course or a
yeah,
$20 course or something like that.
yeah,
It has to be differentiated because it has to be because price is like a heuristic people use for the value. So if they
yeah,
see like a $10 course, they're gonna like their mind is immediately, oh, this is low value. Or like when you saw the $1 course, like, okay,
yeah,
this is low value. That's your
yeah,
first thought. But if you
yeah.
see like $1,000 course, you're thinking
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, why is it $1,000? Like, why are people
Mm.
paying for it? So it's like this automatic thing of like it's more valuable, like it's more involved. So
Yeah,
that's like the first thing, and then it has to be differentiated. You have to be like it has to be clearly, obviously different than the free stuff that you can get online.
okay.
Um, so like one way that is popular, so Maven, which is where
Mm.
I've hosted my course. So Maven, they've kind of bet on this whole thing of that people want like live learning, cohort based learning, and like a lot of professionals are flocking toward that. Like
Mm.
they like the cohort based aspect and like being on live calls and being put into peer groups and things like that. Like
Yeah,
that's more valuable to them because and this is something that people have told me, like it's hard to know where to start, like you
yeah,
said, like to just
yeah,
watch a bunch of YouTube videos. And then when you're just by yourself, you don't have that like positive peer pressure of like
yeah,
other learners and students to help
yeah,
you stay motivated and engaged with the the
yeah,
learning journey.
yeah,
But okay, so I actually have a video on like how I would start
yeah,
learning AI
yeah.
if I started over
You
today.
should send me that video. I will put it as a, thing in our YouTube so that people can look at it. You should send
Okay,
me that video.
let me see. Let me try
Yeah.
to pull it up real quick.
You can send me your email later, not right now.
Okay, okay.
Or email. Yeah, send
Just
me that so that when we
it's
finish our recording, we
okay.
can have that video, because this question is something, and that's why I wanted to. I saw you a year ago, and we had like a LinkedIn mishap, right? And that's why I wanted to interview you. I was like, oh, this person is perfect for us
Oh,
to
okay, got
actually
it.
talk about AI. And I'm glad we're talking today, because now we can actually segue a little bit
Okay.
and talk about everything that is happening in AI, right? And
Yeah.
how would you kind of, like, how you said there was software 1.0,
1.0,
and then
2.0,
as
3.
per Karapati, how would you segregate, and what would you say that, oh, this is the this is where it is, and this is where it's going, and
Yeah.
this is where and then we'll talk about DeepSeek and what China did and everything as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So I was talking about this in a video, like how I would start, how I would learn AI if I could
Yeah.
start over in 2025,
Yeah.
basically. And my approach and the way I've actually learned machine learning and AI, how I got into the space, was by doing projects.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like lay out like the 5 steps that I would take. Like one, I would learn. I would like the very first step I would do if I know nothing about AI is I would start using these tools. Like
Yeah.
it's never been more accessible. You just go to like ChatGPT or Claude and just start interacting with it, so you get like a practical understanding of what these models can do.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the very first step, but I feel like a lot of people, they've already done that. I feel like the next step is to
Mhm.
learn Python. So even though people will say like, we don't
Yeah.
need to learn how to program anymore, for me, like one, if you want to build custom AI solutions, you can't go with the no code stuff. Like the no code is like really easy and fast to use, but
Mhm.
that comes always at the cost of flexibility and
Yeah.
customization.
Yeah.
So if your goal is to build very custom solutions, which is what most businesses and people actually need because they have
Mhm.
very unique problems,
Mhm.
I think learning Python is the best path toward that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the upside is that it's never been easier to learn Python. Like you can just have ChatGPT basically be
Yeah.
sorry a very to be a very smart and patient coding tutor, a very patient coding assistant, and there are a bunch of like free resources on learning Python online. So I
Mhm.
know deeplearning.ai has a great Python intro course. I did like a 47 mini course on Python on my channel, and there's just
Mhm.
like countless resources for that. The next step is I would build a very simple AI project using like OpenAI's API, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
So all this is take a task that you're already using ChatGPT for, like you're going
Mhm.
to the UI and you're having it like, oh, summarize this research paper for me, or like summarize my meeting notes for me, or something like that.
Mhm.
Just instead of doing it through ChatGPT, write a very simple Python script to
Mhm.
use Python's API to do
Mhm.
that. And I feel
Okay.
like through that process, you're gonna learn so much.
Yeah.
And then like I have two more steps in that video, and like basically building like going to the next level of sophistication with the AI projects, and then
Yeah.
one more level up. But I think that's like the best entry point. Just like one, start using the tools. Two, start playing around with Python. And three, build a very simple like automation using one of these APIs.
Okay. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
no. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. No.
Um, yeah, I feel like I was going to say something else, but I forgot. So it's all good. We can go to the next thing.
That's fine. Yeah. So, so we have so many models right now, right? We have Claude, we have OpenAI, GPT models, and we have so many. And then we have a model from Anthropic, and now DeepSeek. So, what do you think? Like, where is the industry as such is going? And I saw like a
Mm,
post by Andrew saying that, oh, I always said, we have to go to the application side, and now it's time to
right.
move to the application side, which I don't know if I agree or disagree. Or I mean, at this point, I think, yeah, foundation models are foundation models, right? You need to go on the application side. So, and some people have said SaaS is dead. I've heard
Mm.
that big statement where SaaS is dead, right? Uh, so where do you see? So we've built our foundation models. Obviously, the foundation models is getting better. We are going to the inference now,
Right.
right? So what do you see, like, if you are looking at, you're taking the big picture view of the industry, how do you kind of see that going?
Yeah, well, I don't think developers, entrepreneurs, professionals need to worry about developing foundation models because one, it takes very big resources and teams and expertise, like specialized expertise to develop those things. So it's
Mhm.
really going to be coming from a handful of research labs and research groups that are
Yeah.
building the foundation models.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even like worry about that and think about that, but it's
Yeah.
almost like a given that these foundation models are going to get better and better.
Hmm.
And so far, like the state as I see it right now is that OpenAI is usually like at the leading edge. So
Hmm.
like they came out with GPT-3 and then kind of put it out with ChatGPT, which is kind of like what allowed it to enter public consciousness. But then
Yeah.
they came out with GPT-4, which was like bleeding edge. Then
Yeah.
they made the jump to GPT-4o, which was like incorporating multi-modalities at training. So not just training on text, but training on images and audio, which
Yeah.
actually led to like smarter and more efficient models. And then
Mhm.
basically everyone started doing that as well.
Yeah.
And then they introduced these thinking tokens with GPT-01,
Mm-hmm.
and then now we're seeing that with DeepSeek. So like having this, these thinking tokens. So basically, you you do a bunch of training ahead of time, but also you can have the model basically prompt itself to like generate these thinking tokens, and then that'll also generate and that'll also lead to more helpful responses.
Yeah.
So I feel like the research is going to get better and better.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this question of like open source versus
Yeah, that was my
closed
next
source,
question. Yeah.
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 So historically, open source always wins. So like Microsoft spent like billions of dollars trying to do a online encyclopedia, and then they lost to Wikipedia, which
Yeah.
had no funding, just completely
Yeah.
open source. And the challenge is when you're closed source, it's literally you against the entire world.
Yes.
And no one is that smart. Like no one can compete against 7 billion people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, sure. Like, so we've already seen this. So OpenAI came out with GPT
Yeah.
4.0, and
Yeah.
then, or they came out with GPT 4 and GPT 4.0, and then Meta put out Llama, and
Yeah.
then they put out GPT-01, and then DeepSeek put out their model. And
Yeah.
so next time OpenAI is going to put out their next innovation, and then some
Yeah.
other lab is going to beat them or
Yeah.
is going to match them,
Yeah.
So it's like you're not competing against another company. You're
Yeah.
literally competing against the entire world, which I don't see how any company can
Do
like
it.
win that
Yeah.
game.
I think I agree with you. I have always been, I mean, I remember studying Linus Torvalds, and I have been a big fan of his work. And I thought, like, wow, in fact, I think like Maker's Bar is kind of inspired by that. And if
Oh,
you see,
nice.
there's a lot of podcasters who are doing it, and it comes from my original roots of like software development, where I thought like open source is much better than. And I work for, actually, I don't have it on my LinkedIn anymore. I work for Sun Microsystems, so
Oh, nice.
that kind of dates me a little bit. So I don't look it, but yeah, so I work for them. And I was an intern, and I remember like the culture that Sun had. I mean, it failed, unfortunately, because we were not able to figure out how to monetize these
Yeah.
open source softwares, right? Kind of a thing. But the culture that Sun had, like, it stayed with me for the rest of my career,
Mm.
because I felt like it was just amazing. Like, it was one of the best companies I worked, just because of the freedom of thought. I mean, that freedom of
Yeah.
thought didn't channelize, obviously, but it failed for whatever reasons, right? But it was one of those companies that has stayed very dear to me
Yeah.
throughout my career.
And that's one
So
thing. Oh, sorry, good.
yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, that's like this idea that you're talking about, just like such a rich and fulfilling culture.
yeah,
Um, but some microsystems unfortunately failed. Like, what is infinitely curious and
yeah,
interesting to me is like, okay, how do you build a
yeah,
company, an organization
yeah,
that gives this fulfillment and has this energy and rich culture, but
yeah,
is sustainable? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's like trying to find that right configuration.
yeah,
And like, like one company that's very famous, and I feel like they've done this well, is Renaissance Technology. So they're actually a very famous, like, investing,
I know. It
yeah, yeah,
started by the Berkeley professor, the master.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's not
So,
anymore. Yeah, he was
uh,
my mentor's. I mean, his son was a mentor's friend, so that's why I kind of know about them, actually.
oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
interesting. So what they basically created was like this private research
yeah,
lab. They just hired a
yeah,
bunch of like physicists and mathematicians to like
yeah,
figure out the stock market, and then they were investing their own money. So they found a way to like create this like rich collaborative
yeah,
research setting where people could like pursue interesting ideas and
yeah,
collaborate. And I feel like they would, it seems like a really fun place to work, but they were also found a way to make it sustainable. They were
yeah,
able to keep the lights on. They didn't have to live on outside funding,
yeah,
which, might sound, which is very common in the research world, but it
yeah,
comes with strings attached. Even if you go the VC route and
yeah,
you get outside funding, there's strings attached to that. You don't have
yeah,
complete intellectual freedom
yeah,
over the things that you want to do.
yeah,
So that's kind of like just like what I'm just pursuing, at least right
yeah,
now. Like, I'm trying to figure out like how can I build a system that
mm,
allows me to fulfill, like, pursue my curiosity, like
mhm.
whatever it might be, but also do it in a sustainable way where I don't have to like get outside funding or have to like work for someone else, basically.
Yeah. So one of the things, so I am a big fan of not taking external capital. Like Makers
Hmm.
is built on no external capital right now, and it was very hard. Like I had to nickel and dime every cent as I
Right.
was thinking through it, kind of a thing. It was not easy to build this, right? But what I figured, one of my motivation was that I wanted to have free. I mean, I wanted it to be bipartisan.
Mm.
We're going to start having political leaders as well very soon.
Oh, interesting.
I wanted it to be as bipartisan as possible, and I wanted to have freedom of thought and as
Mm.
well as speech, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. I don't want to create content which is very controversial. I'm not saying that, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, because I don't like controversies, but
Yep.
at the same time, there might be guests who might have something controversial to say, which might not be palatable, right?
Mm.
And that time I didn't want to have a bunch of investors hanging on my neck saying that you cannot do this kind
Yeah.
of thing,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
So you cannot do this, and that was like my ethos. Like I
Mm.
do not want anybody else to like control the editorial of what we are doing, right? Which is kind of very hard to think for a person when they're just starting off, right?
Yeah.
But I totally hear you in terms of like, even if you went the VC route, a friend of mine now is trying to sell his company, and I mean a portion of his company, and he is like literally juggling between the board, the investors, the small micro investors,
Hmm.
and his company, and this company which is trying to like acquire portion of his company. So
Oh, wow.
the
And
whole
all that while trying to actually run his business.
while trying to run his business, right? Which is like so painful. And he told me, he's like, Akshay, if I was doing this freaking again, and which I will be, I am not taking a single dime of external capital. I was like,
Yeah.
how are you going to build a chip company without taking
Yeah,
external
that's funny.
capital?
Yeah, I was actually talking to a founder recently, and he
Yeah,
like was
yeah.
expressing the same frustrations and
Yeah,
sentiment.
he's like, if I was doing this again, I would take no external capital. I was like, I don't know how you managed to do it. I want to learn how you did it. I said, and then he told me something very, very interesting,
Mm.
and we've had like a long discussion about it. And we'll go back to Renaissance, which I think he did a fantastic job. He told me that it's best not to be public, because I felt, and was I mean I for a brief period of my career I worked in M&A, and I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yes, actually, it doesn't make sense to be public and be having like a bunch of shareholders on your neck, and you
Yeah.
don't believe in something, but you have to go out and tell publicly that you're something else. Like this is
Mm.
just not
Yeah.
doable, kind of a thing. So I said, you know what, I took some time, I thought about it, and I said, I kind of agree with you. It's best not to take any company, but even if they're of that size, kind of a thing. So anyway, so I totally hear you. Going back to a segue of AI now.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so we had discussion about open and closed models, and I totally agree with you. Open models are the way to go, right? So, how do you see like something like a llama trying? How do you think that they can monetize?
Oh, okay. So yeah. So I'll say two things. So one, I feel like in the short run, probably the closed models are going to win, but in the long, like in the next 5 years, OpenAI is going to win, but in the next like 25 years, open source is going to win because
Yeah,
it's just not sustainable.
yeah.
Just my opinion, just my you know, just
I think it's
opinion.
not. It's probably a universal opinion who's thinking about it more. From
Mm,
a. I mean, I would any day use llama models,
right.
personally. But going back to that,
Yeah. So
so I mean, I work for a huge enterprise,
okay.
right? And I mean, if cybersecurity is something that we think about on a daily basis, and it's one field that I've not explored. I've never had to work with, other than dealing with cybersecurity people, I've never like worked in cybersecurity. And that's something that I want to do in
Mm.
my career as well. And so I'm actually curious what you think as we are like looking at these open source models, right? And how, if it's a large enterprise
Yeah.
which has to think about so many things, should they be working with an open AI, or should they be working with
Right.
something like a llama,
I
right?
feel like in the short run, just work with OpenAI, and I think the main reason is, um, well, okay, I think there are a few pieces here. So, like, the first piece is, do I self-host a model, or do I use one of these APIs? And I
Yeah.
would say, for the most part, you want to use the APIs, especially if you're trying to integrate this into your like a feature into a product that you like already have, and you have like a pretty big user base, because like the infrastructure required to run inference for these models and maintain these models, it is very specialized and requires specialized expertise. And
Mm.
so unless you're willing to make like this huge investment in like spinning up one of these things,
Yeah.
I don't think it just makes more sense to use the inference
Yeah.
endpoints. So that doesn't mean you have to use OpenAI's models. You can also use a service like Together AI, which
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
all the open source stuff as
Yeah.
well. So that's one piece to
And
it.
it was Hugging Face as well, right?
Yeah, Hugging Face for sure.
Yeah.
And then Hugging Face, you can like fine tune your own models, and then you
Yeah.
can use their endpoints and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I haven't used Hugging Face's APIs actually, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
what that's like, but I imagine they do a good job like
Yeah.
the other ones. Um, let's see. So you were asking about you
As you
asked,
think about an enterprise, should you go for like an OpenAI, or should you go kind of? A lot of enterprises are now pivoting towards OpenAI just because a lot of
yeah,
enterprises use Microsoft.
yeah. Okay,
And
so I
bought into
think
those
that
products.
right, and then I feel like the second thing is like um, honestly, it probably doesn't really. Okay, actually, no. So I think one of the benefits of using like Anthropic or OpenAI is that they're gonna just be working on their model and improving it in the back end,
Yeah.
and you won't have to like update any code.
Yeah.
While Llama, at least my understanding of it, is that they put out the version and then there's no like continual improvement and development of that model.
Yeah.
So I feel like in the short run, just like use Claude and OpenAI, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, and they have an incentive to make it easy and
Mm.
aligned with the things that enterprises care about,
Yeah.
because they're making money off of it. And I guess the open source folks, they don't necessarily have an incentive to
Yeah.
do those same things. But like, they're giving it away for free, so you can't really complain.
Yeah.
But then, the key upside of open weight models is that you have so much more flexibility when it comes to
Yeah.
these more advanced approaches of fine tuning.
Yeah.
So if you're just doing like inference and you're just writing prompts and doing like RAG and just like building software around the model,
Yeah.
then you can go very far and you should probably just use the APIs.
Yeah.
But if you need to do something more custom, then
Yeah.
you kind of like open source is the way to go, because you have all the models. You can like you can mutilate the model all you want, you can add new layers to it and retrain it. So
Yeah.
it really just depends on the use case, but like by and large, I think just use the OpenAI, Anthropic APIs, things like that.
Yeah. So now we are at like almost 47 minutes, and we can continue talking because the two of us work in this. So I think now, I mean, obviously there's the hardware part of it, right, which is Nvidia, which is kind of dominating, and then you have the
Right.
cloud providers who are basically giving Nvidia's GPUs to you, right? And they are providing services. They provide you Llama and everything in cloud, right? So when you are looking at this, we just recently saw DeepSeek, right? And where I work, we have our own cluster actually, and
Oh,
we
nice.
have to sit and deal with running a cluster, which is just very very painful, kind of a thing. I get gray hairs on a daily basis because half the time the cluster is not working.
Yeah.
I mean, running a cluster has its own pain,
Yeah.
right? So we just had there were embargoes, right, and where we were not exporting certain hardware. Like I know A800s were allowed, but
Oh,
H100s were
okay.
not allowed, from what I
Interesting.
understood, right? So you see a company coming out of China which is saying that you have trained a model in 6 million. First of all, it's impossible, in my humble opinion, from what I know a little bit about foundation models, right? But what are your thoughts on it? And they've done some. I have not read the paper. I'm yet to read the paper, and I think they've done some kind of uh, modifications in the way they are calculating. But I don't think, from what I understood, is that they've hacked A800s to make it as efficient as H100s. And
Mm.
obviously, there'll be a congressional
Oh,
hearing
okay.
now for sure. But I am curious what your thoughts are on China coming up with a foundation model, which is like in less than, which has costed them 6 million.
Yeah, so I guess a few things. Like one, I haven't read the paper either, so I'm not, and I haven't been keeping up with like the news and anything like that. So I'm
Yeah,
not sure about like the technical like hardware details of training and things like that, and just
yeah,
like have like a um, impression of like how they trained the model.
yeah,
But as far as like China coming with models, like I think it's expected. Like China
hmm,
has like a significant portion of the world population. So if you're just
yeah,
talking about like the open source community, like I would expect a
yeah,
significant portion of the models be coming out of them,
yeah,
out of China.
yeah,
And yeah, and also like I have no reason to believe that these researchers would like lie.
yeah,
So I would just take like if I read the paper and they say they did something in a certain way, I would just take that as face value. Like okay, that's why they did it.
hmm,
Um, yeah, I feel I personally don't like fully understand all the
yeah,
hype and excitement
yeah,
around DeepSeek. This is kind
yeah,
of like expected because like
yeah,
if OpenAI comes out with the innovation, I would expect the open source community to respond in like 6 months because that's
yeah,
been the pattern before with Llama, for example.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
expect this pattern to continue.
hmm,
Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think people maybe their eyebrows went up because Nvidia's stock went down, and then narratives
yeah,
came together, and then there was like this social contagion kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I don't think it's like it doesn't surprise me. Just like the whole thing that came out, and it's it
yeah,
wasn't Meta this time. It was a different open source group, and next time it's probably going to be a different open source group. So
yeah,
that's what I expect moving
yeah.
forward.
Totally hear you. One last question, and hopefully, I would this would be my last. So, what are your thoughts on small models, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which people don't understand. They only think about like foundation
No,
models.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's like a
No,
big elephant in the room, right? Which people don't think about at all. So,
yeah. Okay,
yeah,
so I mean, it's definitely very exciting that the software 3.0 that I was talking about, that you can
yeah,
adapt these foundation models through text prompts alone, through just
yeah,
writing instructions.
yeah,
But what I'm more excited about is like there's another level of development on top of these foundation models,
yeah,
which people call post training. Like that,
yeah,
like pre training is everything you do to make the foundation model, and everything after they call post training.
yeah,
And there's actually like a rich set of approaches and techniques in this space.
yeah.
So one of the key ones is model distillation. And what
Uh-huh.
that consists of is you have a big model that does the task that you want very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that you can take that big model and
Hmm.
use what it's learned, so to speak, to
Hmm.
train a smaller model.
Yes.
And this works out. One of the key reasons why it works out is that um, you can use not just like the outputs of the model, but you
Hmm.
can use um, like the internal representations, or like I don't want to get too technical here, but like just to go like one level deeper of like why model distillation works.
Yeah.
Like before it starts generating outputs, these models will have like an output layer, and it'll have like
Mhm.
a set of like probabilities of like what it expects to,
Yeah.
what its prediction is. And basically, you can use those probabilities to give a very strong training signal to a
Yeah.
smaller model, and
Mhm.
then that turns out to be very effective. So yeah, like model distillation, model fine tuning, model merging, like these are all like post training techniques that
Yeah.
I'm very excited about because it allows you to develop very powerful models
Uh-huh.
without the huge investment that it takes to like
Yeah.
train one of these models from scratch. Because if you wanted to create them like a even like a uh, let's say like a paragraph summarizer or something
Yeah.
like that, or like a meeting note summarizer or something like
Yeah.
that. If you wanted to train a model like that from scratch, it would be like a very big undertaking. Like probably take you 1 to 2 years to do that. It'd probably cost you like I want to say like $1 to $2 million or something like that to like get the data together, to
Yeah.
get like curated and do the training and all that kind of stuff. But like
Yeah.
now you can just take like 100 meeting note examples,
yeah,
take a llama kind of model,
yeah,
fine tune it and maybe do some model distillation, and
yeah,
then you could have just like knocked that out in a few weeks or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
as like by yourself. Like you don't even need like a big research team or something.
yeah,
So like the barrier to entry, like you can get you can get really good performance at much lower investment of like time and money.
yeah. So one more last question.
Yeah, that's good.
And I promise you, every time there's new AI that's thing coming up, we will have these conversations on Make It Fun.
Okay, cool.
So one more one more last question. Application side or the foundation side? Where do you see it, the industry going? You think there'll be entrepreneurs who are like sitting in their garage and creating a whole company around this, or and who
Yeah.
basically don't need a big team anymore? That's what the all chatter is on in the internet. But
Yeah.
I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think there'll definitely be entrepreneurship in both sides, but the
Mhm.
difference is the barrier to entry is so much bigger
Yeah,
on the foundation model side.
yeah, yeah.
And also, it's a much smaller pool of people that do that
Do
kind of
that.
stuff,
Yeah,
because you're
yeah,
coming out of like a AI PhD or ML PhD or something like that. If you're going to be starting something like that up, and it's a pretty long game,
yeah,
it's probably going to take a few years to get off the ground. But I guess the other thing that is going to be exciting to see is like right now, NVIDIA is like the main player in town, but of
yeah.
course now there are a bunch of hardware startups trying to kind of take the
So
market
that's
share.
a very difficult chasm to
Right.
cross.
But like once that market develops more and that
Yeah,
technology comes, then I feel, and I guess Nvidia said they wanted to have like a mini cluster that people can have in their homes for like a few $1,000s or something like that.
yeah,
I feel
yeah. I
like
saw
as
that.
that stuff comes
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
um, I feel like there might be opportunities to
yeah,
train. Okay, so I get this just came to mind. So there's like a version of this where you don't necessarily have to train foundation models from scratch to be like
yeah,
a foundation model provider,
yeah,
because a lot of the effort comes, or a lot of the value comes from this post training.
yeah,
So what you could do is just like, I could imagine there are these like startup scrappy labs that are
yeah,
just like 1 to 2 people, and they just do post training. So they take like a llama, they take a Mistral, they take a DeepSeek,
yeah,
and then they kind of do some additional training to
yeah,
adapt it to like a generally broad set of tasks,
yeah,
but the application developers, they're not going to be using DeepSeek directly. They're going to use this post-trained version from this scrappy startup lab. So I
yeah,
feel like there's like this in-between layer as well.
yeah,
But I do think the vast majority of use cases and enterprises and small businesses and startups, they're going to be developing on the application layer
yeah,
because, one, it's like easier than ever, and two, it's going to be more practical.
yeah,
It's going to be a much shorter distance between like that and solving a problem versus like training a foundation model and then doing all the steps required to actually solve a problem with it.
yeah, yeah. Totally hear you. All right. So, sure. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I think we can have more of these as as this industry changes, because I feel like there's so much to learn from each other. Just
Yeah,
this
for
was
sure.
not an interview; it was a conversation I had.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I learned
Yeah,
a lot, and yeah,
yeah,
look forward to doing it again in the
yeah.
future.
We should do this again, definitely. Thank you so much for coming. So.